everybody. I'm back with another chapter of our book, The Absent Author by Ron Roy. Today we're going to read chapter 3, but before we get started, let's review what we read in chapter 2. So we've met our main characters. Here they are. We have Dink, Josh, and Ruth Rose. She's in the red. Those are our three main characters. We also have our setting, so where it's been taking place. And our main characters were all at a bookstore called the Book Nook. Now, where our story starts off is our main characters are really excited because they're going to go meet an author. Somebody who writes books. He's a mystery author. But when they get to the Book Nook to meet him, he's nowhere to be found. Right now, our author, Wallace, is missing. We don't know where he is. And one of our main characters, Dink, this boy here, he thinks that Wallace, our author, has been kidnapped. Now, what does the word kidnap mean? Any guesses? So kidnapped means somebody takes you against your will. So you're kind of like trapped. Do you think Wallace was kidnapped? All right, well, let's read chapter 3 and find out. Here we go. Kidnapped, Ruth Rose shrieked. Her blue eyes were huge. Josh and Dink covered their ears. Shh, said Josh. He handed the letter back to Dink and gave a quick gesture to his head. Some strange woman is watching us. Dink had noticed the woman earlier. She'd been sitting in the back of the Book Nook. She's coming over here, Ruth Rose said. The woman had brown hair up in a neat bun and half glasses perched on her nose. All right, so here we go. So we have our three main characters, Dink, Ruth Rose, and Josh. Dink just told both of his friends that he thinks that Wallace has been kidnapped. And then they notice a strange lady over by the Book Nook. And she's coming over to them. She was wearing a brown dress and brown shoes and carried a book bag with a picture of a moose on the side. Around her neck, she wore a red scarf covered with tiny black letters. "Excuse me," she said in a soft, trembly voice. "Did you say that Wallace had been kidnapped?" The woman poked her glasses nervously. Dink wasn't sure what to say. I mean, he thought Wallace had been kidnapped, but he wasn't sure. Finally, he said, "Well, he might have been." "My goodness," gasped the woman. "Who are you?" Josh asked. "Oh, pardon me," the woman blushed. "My name is Mavis Green." She mumbled, "I am a writer, and I came to meet Mr. Wallace." Dink said, "I'm Dink Duncan, and these are my friends, Ruth Rose and Josh." David shook hands shyly. Then she reached into her book bag and pulled out a folded paper. Wallace wrote me a letter last week. He said something very peculiar in his letter. I didn't think much of it at the time, but when he didn't show up today, and then I heard you mention kidnapping." She handed the letter to Dink. Josh and Ruth Rose read it over his shoulder. "Dear Miss Mavis, thank you for your note. I'm well, and thank you for asking. But lately, my imagination has played tricks on me. I keep thinking I'm being followed. Maybe it's what happens to mystery writers. We start seeing bad guys in the shadows. At any rate, I'm eager to meet you in Green Lawn, and I look forward to our lunch after the signing. Wallace. So this lady got a letter from Wallace, just like Dink, who got a letter from Wallace. "Wow," said Ruth Rose. First, he says he's being followed, and then he winds up missing? Dink told Mavis about his letter from Wallace Wallace. He said the only thing that would keep him from coming today is if he was kidnapped. Oh dear, said Mavis. I just don't understand. Why would anyone want to kidnap Wallace Wallace? If he's the most famous mystery writer in the world, he must be rich, right? Josh said, maybe somebody kidnapped him for ransom. Do you guys know what ransom means? Ransom is, he's saying that maybe somebody kidnapped Wallace Wallace because they want somebody to pay them money so that they free Wallace Wallace. So basically, ransom is getting money for kidnapping somebody. Suddenly, Josh grabbed Dink and spun him around, pointing towards the street. Look! Cops are coming! They must have heard about the kidnapping. A police officer was walking towards them. Josh, that's just Officer Fallon. Jimmy Fallon's grandfather, said Dink. Jimmy came to get his book signed. I saw him in the book nook. Maybe we should go show Officer Fallon these letters, Ruth Rose suggested. They could be clues if Wallace Wallace really has been kidnapped. Who has been kidnapped? Officer Fallon, who was now standing near them. Not my grandson, I hope, he said, grinning. Dink showed Officer Fallon the 2 letters. We think Wallace Wallace may have been kidnapped, he said. He promised he'd come to sign books, but he isn't here. Officer Fallon read Mavis's letter first, then Dink's. He scratched his head, then handed the letters back. The letters do sound a bit suspicious, he said, but it's more likely that Mr. Wallace just missed his flight. Jimmy Fallon ran out of the book nook, waving a Wallace Wallace book at his grandfather. Grandpa! He never came! Can we go for ice cream anyways? Officer Fallon put a big hand on Jimmy's head. In a minute, son. To Dink he said, I wouldn't worry. Mr. Wallace will turn up. Call me tomorrow if there's any news, okay? They watched Jimmy and his grandfather walk away. Dink handed Mavis his letters back to her. He folded his and slid it in his pocket. Crazy thoughts were bouncing around in his head. What if Wallace Wallace really had been kidnapped? It happened because I invited him to Green Lake. I'm practically an accomplice. I don't want to wait till tomorrow, he said finally. I say we start looking for Wallace Wallace now. Where do we start? Ruth Rose asked. Dink jerked his thumb over his shoulder. Right there at the book nook. Excuse me, Miss Mavis said shyly. May I come along too? Sure, Dink said. He marched back inside the book nook with the others. Mr. Paskey was putting the Wallace Wallace books back on the shelf. He looked even more nervous than before. Excuse me, Mr. Paskey, Dink said. Have you heard anything from Wallace Wallace? Mr. Paskey's hand shot up to his bow tie. No, Dink, not a word. We think he was kidnapped, Josh said. Mr. Paskey swallowed, making his bow tie wiggle. Now, Joshua, let's not jump to conclusions. I'm sure there's a rational explanation for his absence. Dink told Mr. Paskey about the 2 letters. I'm really worried, Mr. Paskey. Where could he be? Mr. Paskey took out a handkerchief and wiped his face. I have no idea. He removed a paper from his desk and handed it to Dink. All I have is this itinerary. The others looked over Dink's shoulder as he read. Do you know what an itinerary is? It's almost like a to-do list or a schedule. So he had a schedule for what he was going to do that day. And that's what he's showing the kids. So that's this paper here. So this was everything Wallace Wallace was going to do. Number 1 says, arrive at the Bradley Airport at 7 p.m. Friday, July 15. New England Airlines Flight 3132. Number 2, Meet the driver from Lawrence Taxi Service. Number 3, drive to, what does it say? Shangri-La Hotel. Number 4, sign books at the Book Nook at 11 a.m. Saturday, July 16th. Lunch, then back to the airport for a 4:30 p.m. flight. So this was everything he was going to do. Taking his flight, arriving, signing his books, and getting lunch. Can I keep this? Dink asked Mr. Paskey. Mr. Paskey blinked. Well, I guess that'll be all right, but why do you need the itinerary? Dink picked up a marker and drew circles around the words airport, taxi, hotel, and Book Nook. This is like a trial. It leads from the airport last night to the Book Nook today. Somewhere along this trail, Wallace disappeared. Dink stared at the itinerary. And we are going to find him. And that is the end of chapter 3. So far we have our main characters, Dink, Josh, and Ruth Rose. And they're on a mission to find out what happened to the missing Wallace. And they're going to start by using that itinerary, that schedule, and they're going to go to all those places to try and figure out where he went missing. What do you think? If you were Dink, Josh, and Ruth Rose, would you also try and help to find Wallace? Would you want to help solve the mystery? Let me know. See you later.